Hello, everybody. Please do not leave. We'll be starting the session very shortly. So please do stay. Hello, everybody. We will be starting shortly, so do stay in. And yeah. And there was a question regarding the certificate, e-certificate, and that will be provided as a link after the end of the session. So do wait for it. Hello, everybody. So we shall start the session right away. And here we go. Mediate Guru is a social initiative led by members across the globe. The aim of the organization is to bridge the gap between general public and litigation. Here our organization comes into the picture. We are creating a social awareness campaign for showcasing mediation as the future of alternative dispute resolution to provide ease to the judiciary as well as pockets of general litigants. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the international webinar on mastering the psychology of mediation. I'm Atulya Ranjit, LLB and International Studies graduate student from Middlesex University, and I will be the mediator for the day. Kindly note that the certificate will be provided only after your completion of feedback form, provided at the end of the session. The same will be available only for 15 minutes. We are so privileged to have a wonderful speaker with us today. Ms. Amy Lieberman, ESQ, is a mediator who resolves workplace and business conflicts in the conference room and in courtroom. Amy was ranked #1 in ADR in Arizona by ranking A to Z's Best of Business 2013. The author of Mediation Success, Get It Out, Get It Over, Get It Back, Business, available on Amazon.com. This book is also used to tutor upcoming professionals in various universities. Amy has mediated and resolved over 1,000 employment disputes and related commercial matters, including lawsuits, class actions, EEOC, related commercial matters, charges, internal DRP matters, claims asserted in demand letters, executive and managerial conflict, and conflict between business partners. Ms. Amy advises and trains managers, human resource professionals, and senior level executives on employment issues, resolution of workplace conflict. Ms. Amy is recognized both locally and internationally for her professional skills in resolving disputes. She has repeatedly been selected by her peers as one of the best lawyers in America in ADR. With this, now I would like to request Ms. Amy to kindly take the session forward and enlighten us.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased and honored to be with you and to help Mediate Guru increase the social awareness of mediation as an available option to resolve disputes, both in India and around the world. And thank you also to all of you who are joining us today, to lawyers and law students and mediators and psychologists, human resource professionals, and everyone else that's interested in mediation. I'm happy to be here with you today, and I look forward to taking any questions you might have at the end of our session today. So with the courts, many courts closed down due to COVID-19, mediation is an even more important method for people to seek to resolve their disputes. And a lot of people really wonder, well, why go to mediation? Why use a mediator at all? Why does it work? What's the secret? And so I'm here today to help share with you some of the secrets of the psychology behind mediation. And so that knowing this, for those of you who are either mediators or advocates representing clients in mediation, what is it that you can know and implement in your practice to help increase the likelihood of success for your mediations? So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is what I call the resolution triangle. So there are 3 aspects to resolving a conflict through mediation: position, process, and psychology. So the position is what you think about when you're in a conflict. In a court case, in a litigation case, it might be a financial demand. I want $100,000. The position is the what. What is the demand? What is this about? The other side's position might be, no, you aren't entitled to any money. We didn't do anything wrong. Or I think your claim is only worth 1/10 or $10,000 of what you think. That's the position. And that's going forward into mediation, someone's position. In a divorce situation, it might be, you know, I want the house and I want the retirement, you know, well, but I want the kids full time. And so those are people's positions, right? So what I've come to know is that it takes 3 different aspects to keep in mind when you're trying to reach resolution: position, process, and psychology. And when I talk about process, I'll talk about that a little bit more as we're going. But the important thing about process is it influences how you feel, okay? So that if you are an individual or a party that's participating in mediation, if you feel that the process was fair, if you feel that you were heard, you are more likely to be willing to reach a resolution and to agree to something that is different and maybe not as good as what you had planned on before, because you felt that the process was fair, and the role of the mediator is essential to that. So we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about process later on as what I call a conflict currency. It's one of the great 8 conflict currencies. Okay, the other aspect of the resolution triangle, the bottom of the triangle, you'll notice, is psychology. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, the psychology of mediation, what influences psychology, what makes people feel better about it, and what you can do to help deal with those psychological issues. Some of you might recognize that fellow on the left-hand side of the screen. That's Sigmund Freud, okay? I studied psychology when I was young, when I was in college, and it really helps inform where I come from in terms of working with people in mediation. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about today are, first of all, what I call the driving force of desires, okay? That's the why of what is influencing people to feel the way they feel and to want the things they want, or to refuse to give the things that they're refusing to give. We're going to talk about the importance of expectations. Expectations are the key to success in mediation. As I mentioned a moment ago, We'll talk about the debits and credits of conflict currencies. And lastly, we'll talk about the resolution ratio, and that's the ratio of credits to debits and conflict currencies. And finally, we'll talk about psychic income, which is income that we receive from non-monetary aspects of resolution. Okay, so let's talk about the driving force of desire. After mediating over about 2,000 cases or so, it became clear to me that there were consistent forces that were driving people to the mediation table, to file court, to file a court case, to go to litigation. And this would come out when we were meeting with people in separate session, right? So we'd be together in joint session. We would talk about the process and ground rules or ground requests, as I call them, such as allowing only one person to speak at a time and being respectful, and a few other things that I generally cover, and some opening remarks in a mediation to set the stage for a successful session. Then typically we would break into separate session and the mediator meets with people separately. Now, sometimes in some types of mediation, almost all of the work is done in joint session. So some of these things will come out in a joint session as well. So it depends on the kind of mediation that you're doing, whether your work is going to be mostly joint session work or separate session work, and then you come back together. But regardless of the content and the substance and the type of mediation that you're doing, regardless of whether you're in joint session or separate session, these are the driving force of desires that repeatedly show themselves. The first and the most fundamental need that anybody has in any conflict situation is the need to be heard. Okay, the need to be heard. So that is one of the most essential roles that a mediator can fulfill, is to ensure, again, whether it's in joint session or separate session, that the person is feeling heard. The second and most important thing that people often need is the need for acknowledgement, right? And acknowledgement comes in two forms. The need to have acknowledgement that they're hurting, and an acknowledgement that they've been wronged. They feel like they've been wronged in some way, and that it's legitimate for them to feel that way. And acknowledgement of harm. If the other person has caused them some harm, they really need to make sure that that is spoken. And that's really the way that you acknowledge how somebody is feeling, is by simply, the concept is called affect labeling, which is a fancy way of simply saying, speaking what it is that they're feeling. I can see that you're really upset. I see that you're really angry. These are things that we see as mediators. We recognize this, and yet we don't state the obvious. And it's very important to be able to do that because we have a fundamental need for acknowledgement. Also, apology. As many of you know who are practitioners, the need for apology is key. It is essential to the resolution of conflict. And so, you know, if they'd only said they were sorry, I never would have filed this lawsuit. If they'd only tried to make it right, I never would have gone down this path. So sometimes it may be late, but a genuine apology, better late than never. It really does heal. Okay, the need for fairness. Sometimes people, they just want to get even, right? They want the other side to hurt as much as they do. Interesting thing about the desire for revenge, what the research shows is that we get more pleasurable feelings from the anticipation of revenge than we do when we actually extract revenge. That good feeling doesn't last to really balance out what it is that we're feeling on the other side, our anger and our hurt. But the need for revenge, the desire for revenge is truly just a desire for fairness, right? I mean, you hurt me, I want to hurt you. Recognizing that that's a legitimate need is something that people want to have happen. Fourth, they have a desire to know. A lot of times, for example, in my world, I mediate employment disputes. People get fired and they don't know why. Why was I fired? What did I do that was so bad? What happened? Or simply to know what is the other, what's behind the other side's position. Why are they taking the position that they're taking? I just want to know why. Sometimes, you know, it's be careful what you ask for, because you might get it and it turns out maybe you didn't want to know, but the need to know is really important. Okay, the need for justice, right? That's kind of a form, almost a way of revenge, but the desire for justice is also really important. And sometimes mediation may not be the way to go for someone, because really what they need is vindication or validation through a court of law. As many of you know, it's 97% or so of cases will ultimately resolve short of trial. But if what they need is a public vindication or public validation, again, they may lose, they may not get what they're looking for, but that is a very strong driving force behind what a lot of people may want. Dignity is critical, the need for dignity. And showing respect in mediation is a way to sometimes try to give someone the dignity that they did not get, they didn't feel they got up until that point in time. If people are terminated, sometimes they're fired and their computer access is shut down and their email is turned off and they don't get to say goodbye and they're walked out of the building. That's humiliating. And so it's really important to be able to take steps to try to restore dignity. Sometimes the driving force of desires, what really angers people when they come to mediation, the litigation in court might have gone on for years, or the circumstances leading up to the situation might have gone on for years, and they're just so ready to be done. And what really mattered to them way back when is not so important anymore. They just need to be done. So that's an important thing to stay in touch with as well. Where are they in their psychological journey of the process of dispute resolution? Sometimes people just want a realistic result. No, I'm not going to pay you $1 million. That's not realistic. I wouldn't even lose that in court. That's not realistic. People don't want to pay something that they don't think is realistic. And oftentimes, the last thing that people really want in mediation is to get or to do better than what was expected of them going into the mediation, so that they can look good to the group that they're representing when they're done. Okay, I'm going to actually skip a slide, and I'll come back to this one in a moment, because I want to talk to you about expectations and the importance of expectations. The greatest source of anger and frustration is unmet expectations. Okay, this was not said by me. I didn't come up with this. Thomas Paine is the author of this particular point, psychological point. So the greatest source of anger and frustration is unmet expectations. Okay, so if you're representing a client and they're going into mediation, or you're working with people that maybe aren't represented by counsel, but they're coming before you as a mediator, you know, how can you help influence the way they feel psychologically about the outcome? The goal is realistic expectations. So as advocates who are working with your clients to help prepare them for mediation, you want to talk to them about what might be realistic expectations going in. Okay, now of course, what one side views as realistic isn't necessarily going to be the same as what another side views as realistic. So let's go back to sources of expectations. For plaintiffs, for people who are bringing lawsuits, that source could be counsel's analysis, their lawyer's analysis. It could be the internet, right? People go on these days, they go online, they Google and they search for, you know, what a certain case is worth. And then they want that, right? Or they find there's a statutory maximum that they can get to recover for a certain kind of claim, and they want that, right? Their family and their friends and their colleagues and their coworkers may be pressuring them to try to get a certain outcome from a mediation. Or you might have expectations because, let's say they demanded $1 million before a mediation. Well, they might think, well, I have $1 million case, and they're kind of wedded to that, right? Or if an offer was made on the other side, nobody expects that to go down when you get into the mediation. For defendants, for people who get sued, where are their expectations coming from? Their lawyer's analysis, They might have if they're a big company, they may have a past history with claims and they know what they've paid out in the past. And so that will inform them. If there's jury verdict research on certain claims, you can access that on the internet. That will inform them as well. What they're going to spend to pay their lawyers, cost of defense will influence them. And if they have experience with their lawyer or lawyers on the other side, those will influence them in terms of their expectations as well. So let's talk about why expectations are important. Have you ever had this occur where maybe you were invited to an event or to a party and you think, well, you know, I don't really want to go. I'm not going to know anyone. I'm not going to have a really good time. It's probably going to be a waste of my time. And you go anyway. And you have a great time. You saw some people there that you knew and you reconnected with people. Maybe you met some new people and you had a great time and you left, and maybe you're thinking, or you talk to somebody and you say, gosh, I didn't even think I was going to have a good time at all. And it was great. So it seems to you to be even better because you had low expectations, right? So if you have high expectations, similarly, if an outcome falls short, you will feel that it's even worse. So the goal really is to have realistic expectations. So I think there's two ways as a mediator that you can help people to have these realistic expectations. First of all is to emphasize perspective. And that's something that I always share and focus on that word when we're sitting down in the beginning of a mediation, right? You know, I tell the people, I would like to hear from you as soon as we're done with some opening remarks with respect to your perspective about what brought you here today. And I tell them I would like you to know that I do that for a reason. I use that phrase, that word perspective, intentionally, because when we come to the mediation table, we bring with us our very own perspective, and we come and we tell a story as if it's a fact, based on fact. And the reality is that it's based on a number of things. It's based on fact and also what we recall and what we believe and what we've heard and how we feel and what our friends or family or colleagues or lawyers have told us. And that's all perfectly legitimate. It just wraps up into each person's perspective that they bring to the table. And so while you come here today knowing where you're coming from, and maybe you think you have an idea where the other person is coming from, typically what happens in mediation is that there's some new information that wasn't known before. And while we don't necessarily know in advance what that new information will be, right? And that new information could be a fact. It could be a document you hadn't seen. It could be a statement someone made that you weren't aware of. It could be something as simple as how one of you expresses how you feel. And so while we don't know what that new information will be, what we do know is that it's that new information that typically opens the door and allows people to think about resolving their conflict in a way that they might not have been willing to do before, okay? The other thing that we can do to help people have more realistic expectations is talk about what I call the can live with outcome, okay? So the litigation process, the court process, is what we call a win-lose proposition, right? One side wins and one side loses. People that are familiar with mediation sometimes view it as a win-win proposition, and I've heard lawyers call it lose-lose. I have a different view of the process, and I call it can live with, right? People don't necessarily go dancing out of the room after mediation all ecstatic about what it was that they just agreed to. It's more like, okay, fine. Now that we've had, been able to ensure that the other side knows where we're coming from and vice versa, and to focus on the situation and get some input from the mediator, this outcome might not be the outcome that we envisioned before we got here today, but all things considered, works for us, works for them, and brings the peace that comes with resolution. So because I find that outcome to be realistic, it's reachable, and that's my goal for you and for the process today. And when I share that with people, they tend to nod their heads and agree, even though I'm not asking them to agree, that seems to make sense as an outcome. So that later on in the process, a few hours into it, when one side says, you know, I can live with that, then you know that you're there. Okay? All right. Let's now talk about an aspect of process, okay, and how process influences psychological needs. We value too lightly that which comes too easily, okay? And again, Thomas Paine is the person who said that. I actually think when I said earlier, the greatest source of anger and frustration is unmet expectations, I think that was Samuel Adams and not Thomas Paine who said that. But at any rate, this is not my statement as well. This is someone else's, but it's very true. We value too lightly that which comes too easily. So what does that mean? In mediation, there is what we call the norm of reciprocity. There is back and forth. If it's a financial situation, it's, you know, 100,000, 10,000, 90,000, 20,000, 70,000, 25,000. You go back and forth, right? And if one side refuses to move, then the other side doesn't want to move either. They get frustrated. Now think about what happened, and maybe the case ultimately resolves at 50,000 or 40,000 or something. What happens if somebody comes in and says, I want $100,000, and the other side says, okay. What's the first party going to think? Oh, I should have asked for more. They gave in so easily. I should have asked for more. Same thing if something is offered and the other side immediately accepts it. You're going to think, oh, I offered too much, right? So there is a psychological benefit to the process, because when we work for something, when we fight for something, we feel that we earned it and we had to fight hard for it, so we feel better about it. And that is why going to mediation and exploring your positions and your whys and the reasons behind it, and working for half a day or a day to try to reach a resolution, when you get there, it feels good, okay? Because you were able to not only explore the substantive aspects of it, but explore where the other side is coming from, so that you can both feel that there was some balance and the outcome works for everyone, okay? All right, shifting gears a moment to the next point about where process meets psychology. The process of working with a mediator combats what we call the concept of reactive devaluation. What that means is, when another side that you are an adversary with makes a demand, you're going to automatically devalue it. You will automatically react by saying, well, that's too much, or that's too little, or that's ridiculous, because they are your opponent, right? Whether it's client to client or lawyer to lawyer. So you will dismiss what they want as being unreasonable. When you work with a mediator, if the mediator is a neutral party and is experienced and is respected, then you will not have an automatic devaluation to whatever the mediator might convey to you in terms of information or guidance or suggestions. That is one of the reasons why the process of mediation works, okay? A trust relationship develops with the mediator, and a rapport is built, and the mediator also can help you reset your expectations. Once the trust and rapport is established, if necessary, can share some information with you, whether it's coming from the other side or the mediator's experience, and can help people feel better about the process. Okay, a few more process points. Okay, we talked a little bit about the norm of reciprocity, okay, the give and the take and why it works. Demands, if someone just makes a demand and there isn't a give and take, for example, let's say they made a demand for either full custody of the kids, or they want the house, or they want the retirement, or they want their job back, or they want a certain amount of money, they want somebody fired. If they make a demand and they go to mediation and they don't move from that position, how likely is there to be a resolution? Pretty much zero, because there's no reciprocity, there's no give and take, okay? So the norm of reciprocity is essential to reaching peace. Okay, now I want to move on and talk through what I call the A list of stages. These are emotional stages. psychological stages that parties go through in the mediation process. So think about this, just sort of maybe close your eyes and visualize. You can see these stages as I talk about it. And I'm sure if you are a practicing mediator, or if you've ever been representing somebody in mediation, or even if you're a therapist who has worked with people that are in conflict, you'll recognize these stages. All right, when parties come in to the mediation table, they're filled with anxiety, okay? Even if they're in litigation, they're nervous about their lawsuit. Any conflict, it hurts. It's painful to be sued. It's also painful to bring a suit. Conflict is painful, right? Okay, so you come into the room, and if it's your first time in the mediation setting, you're feeling anxious. You're just nervous, right? You're anxious. Okay. Hopefully the mediator makes some comments and some opening remarks that help to take your anxiety level down a little bit. I talk about some of those tips in the book, and if we actually have some time at the end, we can talk about that in a little bit more detail. But anyway, they're coming in, they're feeling anxious. When the mediator invites that party to share his or her perspective, when you start talking about something that brings you to the mediation table, to the courtroom, you're going to get angry. When you start reliving what caused you to file the suit, or the fact that you've been sued, and talking about how wrong you think the other party is, you're going to get angry. And then as your anger is bubbling up, your adrenaline is going to start flowing, and it's going to be coursing up. And it's the mediator's job to provide the acknowledgement, the validation of their feelings, not necessarily their position, right? You need to be heard. You need to have your concerns and feelings acknowledged, and then the legitimacy of those feelings needs to be validated before you can get on to problem solving. So it's the mediator's job to deal with the parties' feelings and emotions through those first three stages. They're anxious, they're angry, their adrenaline's going. Once then you start the information sharing process, hopefully what happens is that new awareness comes into being as people start saying, well, I didn't know that. That's news to me. Well, that changes things. And the statement that changes things, that changes my view, is an acknowledgement. Okay? So they're aware of new information, and then they will hopefully get to an acknowledgement that new information changes the way they're viewing things. They reanalyze. Now we're into the fourth line. They reanalyze. It causes a new analysis of their situation. And okay, maybe we can make an accommodation for that in terms of our demands or our responses or how we feel. And then they get going in an active participation in the potential ways to resolve the conflict and ultimately reach an agreement. So part of the role of the mediator, right? Remember, we go back to the first thing, the resolution triangle, the positions, the process, and the psychology. So this A list of stages, of these emotional psychological stages, it's part of the process. So part of the mediator's role is to recognize what stage in the process are you at. And if you have not been making enough progress, then maybe you have to go back to an earlier stage and say, well, maybe this person's anger is still there and I haven't adequately addressed the anger. Let's go back to that so we can work on that and decrease that. So that we can get their adrenaline level down, right? When the cortisol is flooding through your brain, when the adrenaline is rushing through your brain, the research on the neuropsychology of conflict and mediation shows that you cannot make rational, reasoned decisions. So that's why it's important as the mediator to be able to work with people to help their adrenaline level come to a lower level. Okay. As you are serving as a mediator, it's important to remember very helpful words, and word choice really does matter. I think if you look closely at the sign on the screen, you would think it should say, warning, trespassers will be prosecuted, but that's not what it says, is it? Take a closer look, right? Word choice really does matter. And all good mediators will learn that, first of all, it's much more important to ask questions than it is to tell. You ask. I wonder if you might consider other non-monetary options that could work in this situation, right? So your statements are either preceded with a softer statement such as, I'm imagining that if you choose this course of action, it might have this impact on your life. Do you think? Yes, no? And you turn it into questions. Are you open to this? Would you consider that? One suggestion or idea might be, we could do this, but on the other hand, there might be another way to go. And part of your role as a mediator is to help people consider options. And your word choice is critical to this process, right? And so you can train yourself as a mediator, or as therapists know this, right? You know, to ask open-ended questions and to help people try to consider on their own where it is they're coming from and where it is that they want to go to, with guidance and suggestions as opposed to directives. In other words, the mediator's role isn't to tell people what to do. And this ties into the process, guys, and this ties into the psychology. Okay, because we don't react well when people tell us what to do. Sometimes, yes, there might be moments in time where there's somebody that you really trust and respect that you really want to say, please tell me what to do. But that isn't the role of the mediator. We don't tell people what to do. We try to be facilitative. We try to be evaluative. And once in a blue moon, we may get to be directive. But generally speaking, the reason that we shy away from being directive is that people tend to resist when they are told what to do. It's as if someone's pointing at you with a finger and telling you what you need to do. You need to do this and you need to do that. No, I don't, right? And we resist. So if people ask us questions, it honors us, right? You honor somebody when you ask them a question and you give them a choice. And people feel empowered when they get to make the decision, which is one of the great things about mediation, is it allows the participants to be able to make their own choices. So think about words. You can choose your own words and phrases, but your words will help people get to a better place in their conflict. Okay. The last thing that we want to talk about as part of this webinar today is what I call the Great 8 conflict currencies, the concept of psychic income, and the resolution ratio, okay? I call them conflict currencies. For those of you who have read Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the things that he talks about is the trust bank account, right? If somebody harms you and you feel like you've been betrayed, they've hurt your trust, but you've had a long-standing relationship with them and they've always had your back, then they've made significant deposits into the trust bank account so that one debit isn't going to ruin the relationship. On the other hand, if there haven't been any deposits made into that trust bank account, it could totally destroy the relationship. I completely agree with Stephen Covey's thinking. I think in the concept of conflict, though, there's many more currencies than just trust. Money is one of them, yes. You know, you've harmed me, you've fired me, you've stolen my business, you know, or you're leaving me and, you know, I don't have a source of income anymore. Money is critically important in terms of resolving conflict, but money is not the only thing. Remember what I said earlier about sometimes people being willing to resolve conflict in a way that they might not have been willing to do if they feel that the process was fair. Well, how they feel will also be influenced by these other conflict currencies. First of all, people have conflict because they've lost trust and they want to have trust reestablished. They feel that they've been disrespected and they need to have a sign of respect. They don't feel appreciated. Perhaps the work they've done wasn't appreciated. Their long years of service that they've given to the company wasn't appreciated. The fact that they were a great wife and mother or father for many years wasn't appreciated. The fact that they built up the business on their own or how much they've devoted to it isn't appreciated. Lack of appreciation, they're not appreciated in their job, is a key conflict currency. If you can get that back, help restore that, that will help. We've talked earlier today about acknowledgement. It's critically important to have acknowledgement, acknowledgement that I did something wrong to you, or acknowledgement I can see that you're hurting. Acknowledgement, apology goes with that too. I acknowledge that I harmed you and I'm sorry. Communication is a key conflict currency. Sometimes when you peel the layers of the onion back, what you often find is that it stems back to a problem with communication. You know what? You never told me that this was the reason. Or, you know, you communicated this issue to, you went public with it. You know, you sent an email at 4 a.m. to, you know, 12 people. They didn't need to know. You breached my privacy. So you didn't tell me what I needed to know. You overshared with everyone. You were too public. You were too private. Some aspect of communication can be really important. Fear is also a really important conflict currency. Okay, I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of not being able to support myself. I'm afraid that my reputation is going to get ruined and I may never be able to get another job. I'm afraid for my children. I'm afraid for my business. Fear is an important conflict currency, and anything that you can do non-monetarily to help allay somebody's fears is a very important part to influence how they feel psychologically.
Hello, ma'am. Your voice is not audible. Please on your speaker. Hello. She can't hear.
Ma'am, you've probably muted yourself.
I think somebody else has muted her. However, like, I don't think she muted herself.
Ma'am, you've probably muted yourself.
Miss Amy, could you please unmute yourself? And it's down left.
Okay, did that work?
Awesome, that's great. Yes, it did work.
Okay, all right. I have no idea how that happened, but anyway, it's okay. We're almost at the end anyway, and almost ready for questions. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. And so really the last point, thank you to everybody, and sorry about that. I have no idea how that happened. I didn't touch my screen, but anyway, okay. So the last thing to cover with you folks is that in terms of the conflict currencies, it often takes what I call the resolution ratio of 3 to 1. It takes 3 times as many credits to offset 1 major debit for the psychic income needed for resolution. If you think about it, let me give you a simple example that proves this point. Let's say you go out to dinner to a restaurant and you spend a lot of money. Let's say you order something very, like a steak or something very expensive, and you're having dinner with a bunch of people. This is pre-COVID when we all went out for dinner, right? Okay. And they bring your food and they have cooked your food incorrectly. Okay. And so you complain and they say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll fix it right away. Meanwhile, what's happening while you are waiting? all of your friends are if they're like they're waiting too, and you're saying, no, go ahead and eat. No, we'll wait for you. No, eat, please. Okay. So either they eat and you feel awkward, or they don't eat. And anyway, it's just an awkward situation. And you might be a little frustrated with that restaurant. If they ultimately bring your food and everyone else is done eating, it's not really a good situation. But if they apologize and they say, we took it off of your bill, and also we'd like to give you a free dessert. We're so sorry. Okay, you know what? Instead of thinking this is a terrible place, I'm never coming back here again, you're thinking, oh my gosh, they were so nice. I mean, I can't believe they took it off the bill. They brought a free dessert for everyone. They said they were sorry. This is a great place. And so I would definitely come back here again, right? And that's a simple example, a minor example. In the United States, we can give examples of famous athletes or movie stars, or someone who have been accused of sexual harassment, or they've made a homophobic slur or statement or something. And what happens? What do they do to try to rehabilitate themselves? They don't just say they're sorry. They may go, they may get suspended. They may get fined. They may get kicked off of a motion picture. They'll go public and apologize. They'll donate to charities. And they're trying to do as many things as they can to offset the debit that they have created, the betrayal that they have created, right? 3-to-1. So what that means for people who are mediators is, when you are thinking about ways to help people resolve conflict, think of 3-to-1. Don't just think money. It's not how much money do you want? How much money can I pay? It's what else can we do? Can we say we're sorry? Can we go public with something? Can we make a donation? Can we change their termination to a resignation, right? What can we do non-monetarily to help provide psychic income to help heal the harm that's been caused? So I think that is it for the presentation, and should we see if anybody has any questions? Okay. Stop sharing. No, that's the wrong one. Hello, should we start?
Hello?
Should we? Okay, there we go.
Yes, thank you so much, Miss Amy. That was indeed an informative and interesting session. And to all, it would be extremely helpful if everyone doesn't share their personal information in the chat box, as well as sharing the screen during the session. So now, Ms. Amy, we could go towards the interactive session of question and answer.
Okay.
So the first question is, what are the roles of perception, assertiveness, attitude, mindset of mediator while facilitating mediation?
The role of the mediator in terms of assertiveness and the mediator's attitude is essential to always be aware of the process, to be facilitative, to be evaluative if asked, but not too soon, not ever too soon, right? Because again, if you start telling people what to do, you're going to meet with the resistance. But to remember that you as the mediator are the shepherd of the process, okay? So remember that individuals want to have a choice, that they will feel powerful when they have a choice, to be mindful of the resolution triangle, position, process, the psychology, and the stages that people are working through as you're building a rapport and shepherding them through the process.
That's great. So I will move on to the second question, which is how to identify a conflict and resolve it at the same time when an individual don't want to remember it again for the healing purpose, and also as it gives pain to her.
Well, that's a great question. I think it's people who come to mediation are in conflict and they have pain, right? Okay, so to identify the conflict and the source of the pain is really a key question. And there is a key question that I like to ask for this, which is this: what is it about for you? What is this about for you? I like that question because it's an open-ended question and it allows people to go where they need to go in an answer. It allows people to go where they want to go in an answer. And it can help you as the mediator, help them explore what is at the root of the conflict. The second part of the question that you asked is when it's painful, how do we get to the healing, right? When it's healing, it's painful for someone to go to. It goes to acknowledging the pain. Okay, so what happens when we are in a conversation with someone, when we're talking in a conflict conversation? You know they're in pain, you know that they're hurting. You can see it, you can feel it. And what we tend to do, most of us, is we tend to back off. We see it, but we just kind of want to go past it. We know that they're hurting, we know they're in pain, and we just try to jump into solutions, right? That's not the way to get healing to occur. The way to get healing to occur, and all psychologists and therapists know this, is to take a pause, take a stop, and say, I can see that this is really painful for you, right? I understand that this is frustrating, and let's talk about it. And you need to go there, right? You go there, you kind of take this, I guess I would call it a Zen approach, right? You go there, jump into the pain, go there, stay with the pain for a while. Mediation is not psychotherapy. I got something on my screen here that said somebody else was presenting, so I want to make sure it's okay. It's not psychotherapy, but there's psychology involved in it, right? And so you have to be able to go to that place of pain with someone in order to be able to help them go through it. And speaking that pain demonstrates that we're listening, demonstrates that that person's been heard and understood. And acknowledging and validating the legitimacy of how they feel is really essential to help them move through that pain.
Okay, that's quite interesting. And then the third question, what I would like to ask you is, once mediation fails, do parties appeal to the court, that is litigation, or do they have to start a suit afresh in a court of law?
Well, it depends what stage they're mediating at. I mean, sometimes mediation is court ordered, right? So if you're in court, the judge might order parties to go to mediation. But generally speaking, mediation is voluntary and you can do it at any time. So even if you mediate and the mediation fails, you can continue with your litigation in court. You can always pick up and try to mediate again later. So it doesn't have to be that it's only once. Usually it's only once, but it doesn't have to be that. You can always try it again later.
Okay. I would also like to ask you a question that, is it possible to successfully mediate a human rights issue?
Yes. Sometimes there's overlap. For example, I mediated a class action case that was dealing with discrimination against people with based on national origin, and there were some human trafficking issues involved in that case, right? And so, yes, you can. I think that would really anything that people are willing to sit down and voluntarily discuss. You know, one of the things I didn't mention earlier on is that half of the mediations that I do are legal in nature, mediating legal claims, individual or groups or class actions, and the other half are individual conflict or group conflict in the workplace. And so you can, recently here in the United States, the governor of one state was ordered to sit down and mediate with the mayor of a state over wearing masks, right? They had conflict over wearing masks. So really anything can be mediated. Anything that people are willing to sit down and discuss can be mediated.
Okay. My next question is, what would we do if we fervently disagree with the client's proposed solution?
So is that question coming from the standpoint of a lawyer or the mediator, or both?
I assume both, because if we, disagree with the client's proposed solution, what would we do,
Well, if you're the lawyer and you're disagreeing what your client is suggesting, you can certainly talk to your client to say, why are you doing this? I don't think that's the best course of action for you. But as the mediator, if you disagree, it's not your place to disagree. Really, we are not there to judge. We are not there to direct. We are not there to tell. And so it's the client's right to make those determinations, and we have to strive to withhold judgment. We could say, well, I'm not sure if the other side is going to be receptive to that, but we can certainly try. Well, I'm not sure how realistic that is, but we can definitely try. It's you've got to withhold your judgment if you're the mediator.
Okay, that's nice. Okay, so now the questions have come to an end, and I do hope that Ms. Amy, you had a great time answering them, and it was indeed informative. So, as all good things come to an end, so has this session. I would like to thank Ms. Amy for such an enlightening and informative session. I would also like to thank all the professionals from different parts of the globe who joined us today and made this event a huge success. Also, kindly note that the certificate will be provided only after your completion of the feedback form provided on the chat box. The same will be available only for 15 minutes.
Okay, and can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I see that there were lots of chats that came up with other questions that we didn't have time to get to today. But if my contact information,
you could answer if you find any interesting question over there. It would be really helpful if you could answer it right now. We do have a little bit of time, so. Okay,
the questions I saw them popped up in the chat and then they went away. So I don't remember what they were. I do remember one question that I saw where somebody said, what do you do when you try and they absolutely can't get anywhere in the mediation? One thing that you can do is reschedule for a later point in time. And one or another approach that you can take is what I call the paradoxical intervention, which is to say, well, you guys certainly don't need to resolve. We don't have to keep working on this. We can just stop, which sometimes might motivate people to come back and come up with some more creative ideas. So at any rate, if there's other questions that you would like to have answered or have a discussion, you can feel free to reach out to me through either LinkedIn or through my email, which I think was provided with the presentation, which is amy@insightmediation.com, and I'd be happy to connect with you.
So thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Amy, and stay safe, everyone, and have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Miguel.